Rogerson. The name hangs in the air like a bad smell, a stain on the fabric of Australian law enforcement, a name that evokes a sense of betrayal and mistrust. Rogerson wasn't just corrupt. He was a master manipulator, a puppet master pulling strings in the criminal underworld while wearing the badge of the law. His influence was far-reaching, affecting not just his colleagues, but the entire justice system. His story is a twisted tale of power, greed, and a blatant disregard for the very laws he swore to uphold. He used his position to enrich himself, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. From the mean streets of Sydney to the courtrooms where his crimes were finally laid bare, his actions shocked the nation. Rogerson's life is a study in the dark side of human nature, a cautionary tale of how power can corrupt absolutely. This is not just another cop story. It's a chilling reminder of the depths to which a person can sink. It's a descent into the heart of darkness, a journey through a labyrinth of lies and deceit where the lines between right and wrong blurred and morality was a mere afterthought. And a man entrusted to protect the law became its most infamous breaker. Born in Bankstown, Sydney in 1941, Rogerson's early life was far removed from the corridors of power he would later occupy. His childhood was marked by the simplicity and struggles of post-war Australia. Growing up in a working-class suburb, young Rogerson was exposed to the rough underbelly of Sydney from a young age. The streets were his playground, and the lessons he learned there were harsh and unforgiving. Joining the New South Wales Police Force in 1959, he quickly climbed the ranks, gaining a reputation for his sharp mind, ruthlessness, and an uncanny ability to get results. His colleagues both admired and feared him, recognizing his talent and his relentless drive. But behind the facade of a dedicated officer, a darker side was already beginning to emerge. Whispers of corruption and misconduct started to circulate, hinting at a man who was willing to cross any line to achieve his goals. The very qualities that made him an effective policeman, his ambition, his ruthlessness, his willingness to bend the rules, would ultimately become his undoing. These traits transformed him from a protector of the peace into a figure of fear and notoriety, a man whose name would become synonymous with corruption and betrayal in the annals of Australian history. Fresh out of training, the newly minted Constable Rogerson found himself patrolling the streets of Sydney. It was the 1960s, and the city was a different beast then. Rogerson, with his sharp mind and even sharper tongue, took to the job like a duck to water. He had a knack for getting confessions, for sniffing out criminals, and for bending the rules just enough to get the job done. His superiors, impressed by his results, turned a blind eye to his methods. The ambitious young officer, hungry for recognition and power, was already beginning to develop a taste for the dark side. Rogerson's rise through the ranks was swift. He excelled in the high-pressure world of armed robbery and homicide investigations, earning a reputation as a tough, uncompromising cop who always got his man. His superiors, eager for results in a city grappling with rising crime rates, often overlooked his unorthodox methods and his growing arrogance. But Rogerson's ambition was a double-edged sword. It fueled his successes, but it also fed a growing sense of entitlement, a belief that he was above the law he was sworn to uphold. As his power grew, so too did his willingness to abuse it. The first cracks in Rogerson's carefully constructed facade began to appear in the 1970s. His name was linked to a series of high-profile scandals, accusations of bribery, extortion, and even involvement in drug trafficking. Internal investigations were launched, but Rogerson, with his network of informants and his uncanny ability to cover his tracks, always seemed to slip through the net. Despite the mounting evidence, Rogerson remained a powerful figure within the force. He had dirt on everyone, it seemed, and he wasn't afraid to use it. The whispers of corruption were growing louder, threatening to erupt into a scandal that would shake the New South Wales police force to its core. The brutal 1986 murder of nurse Anita Cobby shook Australia to its core. Rogerson, at that time a seasoned detective with a reputation for cracking tough cases, was assigned to the investigation. He threw himself into the case with characteristic zeal, working tirelessly alongside his colleagues to track down the killers. Through a combination of old-fashioned detective work, informants, and some say questionable interrogation tactics, Rogerson and his team apprehended the 5 men responsible for Cobby's murder. The case, a beacon of success in Rogerson's career, cemented his image as a hard-nosed but effective cop. Yet, even in victory, a shadow lingered. Rumours circulated about the methods used to extract confessions, whispers of brutality and coercion that would later resurface to haunt Rogerson's legacy. If the Anita Cobby case showcased Rogerson's investigative prowess, the shooting of Warren Lanfranchi in 1981 exposed the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Lanfranchi, a small-time criminal, was shot and killed by Rogerson during a supposed arrest. Rogerson claimed self-defense, stating that Lanfranchi was armed and had attempted to flee. However, inconsistencies in his account, coupled with a lack of corroborating evidence, raised serious doubts about his version of events. The public, once enamored by his tough-talking persona, began to question the methods of a man who seemed increasingly comfortable operating outside the boundaries of the law. The Lanfranchi shooting marked a turning point, a moment when the public's perception of Rogerson shifted from flawed hero to something far more sinister. The 1986 murder of Sally Ann Huckstep, a former heroin addict turned police informant, added another layer of controversy to Rogerson's already tarnished reputation. Huckstep, who had publicly accused several high-ranking police officers of corruption, was found drowned in a Sydney park. While there was no direct evidence linking Rogerson to Huckstep's death, her murder fueled speculation about a police cover-up and Rogerson's possible involvement in silencing a woman who knew too much. The Huckstep case, though never directly linked to Rogerson, cast a long shadow over his career. By the 1980s, Roger Rogerson wasn't just dabbling in the darkness, he was practically swimming in it. The line he'd been blurring for years, the one between upholding the law and breaking it, had vanished entirely. He'd always been close to informants, cultivating relationships in the criminal underworld. Now those relationships became partnerships. Rogerson, the hunter, had become the hunted, a predator in his own right. He used his knowledge, his connections and his badge to facilitate criminal activities, skimming profits from drug deals, tipping off targets about upcoming raids, and silencing those who dared to cross him. It was a betrayal of epic proportions, a descent into corruption that would forever tarnish his legacy. The world of organized crime welcomed Rogerson with open arms. He was a valuable asset, a man who could navigate both sides of the law, a corrupt cop who could make problems disappear. Drugs became his currency. Heroin, cocaine, marijuana, it flowed through his fingers, leaving a trail of misery and addiction in its wake. Money, too, became an addiction. The modest salary of a police officer couldn't satisfy his newfound greed. He lived lavishly, indulging in expensive tastes, frequenting casinos, and surrounding himself with the trappings of wealth. His lifestyle became an open secret, a blatant display of his corruption, yet he seemed untouchable, operating with a sense of impunity that bordered on arrogance. The murder of 20-year-old Jamie Gao in 2014 was a crime that shocked even those familiar with Rogerson's brutal past. Gao, a small-time drug dealer, had become entangled in Rogerson's web. Lured to a storage unit in Sydney's southwest, he was shot and killed by Rogerson and his accomplice, fellow former detective Glenn McNamara. The motive? A drug deal gone wrong? A dispute over money and drugs. The subsequent trial was a media spectacle, a chance for the public to confront the man who had haunted their city for decades. In 2016, Rogerson and McNamara were found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. For years, Rogerson operated under a cloud of suspicion. Whispers of his misdeeds followed him from station houses to crime scenes, but concrete evidence remained elusive. Internal Affairs, the department tasked with policing the police, had him in their sights, but Rogerson, a master manipulator, always seemed to be one step ahead. He knew how to work the system, how to exploit loopholes, how to silence those who might speak against him, but the walls were closing in. Each scandal, each controversial shooting, each unanswered question chipped away at his facade. The net was tightening, slowly but surely. Rogerson, a man who had spent his career putting criminals behind bars, found himself on the other side of the justice system, facing a jury of his peers. The courtroom became a stage, a battleground, where prosecutors laid out his crimes and defense attorneys fought tooth and nail to salvage his reputation. The trials were media circuses. Each new revelation splashed across newspapers and dissected on evening news bulletins. The public, captivated and appalled in equal measure, watched as the man they had once hailed as a hero was exposed as a fraud. Through it all, Rogerson remained a study in contradictions. Despite his best efforts, the weight of evidence against Rogerson proved insurmountable. The guilty verdicts, when they came, were met with a mix of relief and a sense of grim satisfaction. Sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jamie Gao, Rogerson's days of wielding power on the streets or manipulating the justice system were over. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now confined to a cell, his freedom stripped away, his legacy in ruins. Rogerson's name will forever be etched in Australian criminal history, but not for the reasons he might have hoped. Instead of being remembered as a legendary lawman, he is the embodiment of police corruption, his story a cautionary tale whispered in police academies and debated in law school classrooms. The damage he inflicted upon the New South Wales police force is immeasurable. His actions eroded public trust, fueled cynicism towards law enforcement, and cast a long shadow over the honest efforts of the many dedicated officers who serve with integrity. Beyond the badge, lessons from the abyss. This is a journey into the heart of darkness, where the lines between hero and villain blur. The saga of Rogerson is more than just a cop story, it's a stark reflection of societal failings. It's a narrative that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our institutions. It exposes the dangers of unchecked ambition, the kind that can drive a person to cross moral boundaries in pursuit of personal gain. The seductive allure of power, which can corrupt even the most well-intentioned individuals, turning protectors into predators. And the corrosive nature of corruption, which eats away at the very fabric of trust and integrity within our communities. His descent into criminality serves as a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of what can happen when power is left unchecked, reminding us that the line between good and evil is often blurred, and that even those we trust to uphold the law can fall prey to its temptations, and that even those entrusted with upholding the law are susceptible to its temptations. It's a stark reminder of the human condition and the vulnerabilities we all share. His story also highlights the importance of accountability and transparency within law enforcement agencies. Without these, the system is doomed to repeat its mistakes. The systemic failings that allowed Rogerson to operate with impunity for so long must be addressed to prevent similar cases from occurring in the future. This requires ongoing vigilance, robust internal oversight, and a commitment to ethical standards, and a culture that encourages ethical behaviour and whistleblowing. Only then can we hope to build a system that truly serves and protects. The legacy of Rogerson is a complex and troubling one. It's a story that forces us to look in the mirror and question our own values and the systems we uphold. It is a story of betrayal, violence, and the dark side of human nature, and a profound abuse of power. It's a narrative that underscores the need for constant vigilance and reform. Yet within this darkness there are lessons to be learned, lessons that can guide us towards a better future. Lessons about the fragility of trust, the importance of accountability, and the need for a system that supports integrity. And the ever-present potential for corruption to poison even the most noble of professions. It's a call to action for all of us. By confronting the uncomfortable truths of his story, we can begin to heal and build a more just society. We can strive to create a more just and equitable society, one where the rule of law is upheld by those who are truly committed to justice, one where the badge is a symbol of protection, not predation, a symbol of hope, integrity, and unwavering commitment to the greater good.